All right, guess what we're going to be looking at today? Yes, the same Commodore 64 power supply. So this was really cool because I got some ideas from the comment section. A lot of the comments were very helpful. I also had some really good comments from Mark from the Retro channel. He almost randomly got the same kind of power supply in a recent Commodore 64 batch that he got. I think that video is out now for everybody. So if you're interested, I'll leave a link in the description to Mark's channel. It's definitely worth a watch if you're not already a subscriber. So I'm gonna take a lot of that and have the last look at this power supply. I promise it's the last look. I don't care what happens today. If I have to look at it again, I will not turn on the camera. Anyway, so I have a few things that I wanna go over. First of all, I just wanna see why I wasn't getting the LED turning on last time. Maybe it was the way I put it back, maybe something happened, so I opened it up and I'm not seeing anything, obviously, that snapped or anything on this LED, so we can just check voltages right there. So we're getting a full 5 volts across that, which seems like a lot. Oh, so there's either bad contact or a broken solder joint or something, because if I touch it and I force it in certain ways, it comes on. So this is just probably from me bending it a little bit during this inspection. Oh, it looks like as this rotates, maybe one of the lead in here is broken. Yeah. So really I should just replace this whole thing, which I'm not sure I have one tiny one like that. So maybe for now, since I don't even know what I'm going to end up doing with this power supply, I'm just going to leave it alone. And if I put it back in the case, I'll just leave it like this, but not a big deal. Just mental note, I need to replace it. It's probably broken right there. Okay, next point that I wanted to talk about is that bent power supply. Remember that when I put this back in here, this was really bent like that. And someone in the comments had a very good insight, and he was able to tell, and obviously it's pretty obvious now, that this is because of the power connector right here. I don't know what the name is for this power connector. I think he called it the Mickey Mouse connector because of the of the shape with the ears and stuff. This is completely unnecessary. There is no reason to have this here because it's like an earth connection that is not being used at all. So the correct way to fix this would be to use, instead of that connector, to use one of those. I'm horrible with these kind of names because I'm self-taught all these things, so I don't even know what they're called, but whatever. This kind would be perfectly fine. And I would do it right now. This connector is screwed in there, and then it has, again, hot glue, probably for holding it in place, and maybe some extra insulation to make sure that nothing touches those screws. But I don't have this kind of screw-on recipient for this. But again, if I'm gonna be keeping this power supply, which there's a chance because of something that is coming up in about 10 minutes, that would be the way to go. Replace that with that. Honestly, it's pretty inexcusable that they use this. I mean, yes, they had the spare parts, and maybe those make sense in Europe, but I mean, come on, get a bigger case or get a different connector. I looked through my drawers and I found this connector, but it's the same problem. This is about as tall and it's even a little wider there, so that wouldn't work either. So yeah, I really need one of those that is just a lower profile, and then the PCB would be sitting there perfectly fine. So need to make a note for that. Can somebody tell me the name of this connector so then I can look up the one that I need to buy in there? Thank you. Okay. I just realized I'm not even wearing an appropriate shirt for today's video. That's a fail right there. Okay, next point is one of the things I meant to do last time and I never did because the video was long enough, is to check when the 5-volt rail fails or just shuts on for that half a second, which more and more I'm getting convinced that that is the safety feature built into the Meanwell power module here. There's probably too much current or something like that, and it shuts down, and it is designed so that when the problem goes away, so when the current draws, or probably, yeah, when the current draw drops, then it comes back to normal. So that's probably where we're seeing that about half-second delay. So the thing that I never checked is that when that fails, does the AC current also fail or also shut down? I'm assuming these two are separate. It would still be a nice thing to know since we're in full exploration mode. So I'm going to try to do that now. And then, also that requires that this fails again, which, as we've seen before, sometimes it refuses to do that and it works for a while. So let's try it. Okay, so I've hooked up the oscilloscope, and just this time I'm not even using my adapter there to see the current. I'm just looking at the voltages, since that's enough to know if it's holding back or not. So I have the 5-volt rail hooked up to the LED connection, and the other one actually to the output of the 7805, which is pretty much what turns the 9-volt AC rectified into the other whole 5-volt section of the Commodore 64, which I believe is what's used probably for the video, the VIC-2 chip, if I remember correctly, and maybe the SID chip, so that way it's completely isolated from the rest. There's a lot less noise and all that. That's why they did that. So if everything works, we should see one of them going to 5 and the other one going to, 5, right, because I'm not connected to the 9-volt AC. So they should both go up. So, and that's because I'm not even connected here. Okay, let's try that again. Take 2. Right, so that looked okay. Certainly one was a little slower than the other. Oh, there you go. There you go. So that answered the question that I wanted to answer. And it's nice that it failed right away. Second try, no editing here. The 5-volt rail held back for about half a second, but we saw that the blue line, which is the second one derived from the 9-volt AC, that one was 5 volts right away. So as I suspected from poking around on the power supply, the two modules seem to be independent. Okay, well, that's one of the questions that I had in there, so that's good. So all of this leads me to one of the more interesting revelations, which is what Mark over at the Retro channel figured out when he opened his module. It was surprisingly the same, even though his is in Australia, and I think the Meanwell power supply was exactly the same. This one looked a little different. It was red and then marked, or orange, something like that. I'm assuming it would be pretty much the same. Everything looked exactly the same. And even his PCB was also bent just like this one. So that's just a standard thing they did in that power supply. But there was one key difference in his. And that was this thing here. This looks just like another unpopulated connector. It says ground, 12 volts, and 5 volt. It had a capacitor. It had a big electrolytic capacitor right there. So I stopped his video, I took a screenshot, and it turns out that what he had in there was exactly a 470 microfarad 25 volt capacitor. And it would have to be, so the negative leg would be on ground and the other one was in 5 volt. And that's funny because it's not like this is an unpopulated spot for a capacitor. That was clearly added afterwards. I'm very curious who added that. Is that from the factory, or was the person who had Mark's power supply before had similar issues to what I had and put one in there? So that's very interesting, and I'm definitely going to try it right now. If that works, if with this we don't get that shutdown, it would kind of make sense. This would help buffer some of the potential problems of too much current and draw and things like that. It may also mean that some of the capacitors in the PAL Commodore 64 here, maybe they're a little old and they're starting to fail, and this may just help them. You know, it's almost no different adding this here than replacing a faulty one on the Commodore 64 between ground and 5 volts. So maybe that's an indication that that's why they failed on this particular board. But in any case, I am definitely adding this, and then we'll measure that again and see if it makes a difference. There it is. That looks exactly like Mark's. There's no chance of this touching the 12 volt connector there, so that's great. And hopefully this is just enough out of the way from the connectors that we don't have an issue. I mean, things were pretty tight in this box, but hopefully we'll be fine. And if not, I can always adjust it later, knowing that that's what the problem is. Okay, let's try this again. Worked perfectly fine, first try. It worked again, second try. And I know it doesn't mean much, but I had it fail the second time right now, so yeah. I think that just fixed it. Tell you what, I'm not gonna sit here half an hour doing this. I'm sure I'll continue playing around with this computer and this power supply for a while, especially if it's working. I'll continue using it. If I have that problem again, I will make sure I put a pinned comment on top. Actually, I'm gonna put a pinned comment no matter what, explaining my experience with it. Has it happened again, or did that capacitor just fix it perfectly fine? Yeah, I mean, it's rock solid right now. Yep. Yeah, interesting. So, all right, here's another one for you. I love it when you guys contribute. So I know a lot of you told me you have similar power supplies from Electroware. And actually, all of you who said that said you've had zero problems with them, which is great. Would you mind opening your power supply and seeing if you have a big capacitor in there? And if so, let me know. I'm just dying to know, is this something they added at some point, or was that somebody's fix that Mark had in his? Yeah, that would be very interesting to know. One last time? Yeah, perfect. Okay. I think that is going to be enough for this power supply. No more videos about it. There's one more thing. So I may not need this anymore, but since I was having issues with that, and the only other power supply that I had was one of the original Commodore 64 ones, actually it was a VIC-20 one, so even older, I decided to go ahead and buy another modern replacement. So this one is very slick looking. It's a nice box, not very big, and has the same connector you would expect. And yep, it looks totally standard. It's interesting that they come from the end, both of them, so that's actually pretty convenient if you're going to put it next to the computer. And I got this one based on the recommendation from a lot of you from Ray Carlson. If you don't know Ray Carlson, that means you haven't done any Commodore 64 repairs. He has an amazing website with so many resources about the internals of Commodore 64, and specifically about some of the symptoms and some of the repairs, and just so much information on his website. I'll drop a link. I'm sure you know about it, but if not, it's definitely worth bookmarking and visiting and everything. So I had read that he was starting to retire from just general retro computer activity. And so I contacted him, and he replied right away and saying, he is, but he still has material, so he's going to continue selling these until he is out of the material. I think he has a lot of them in storage. So I got this, and I got also at the same time a power supply for the Commodore 64 disk drive, which I didn't have one. So I'm excited to try them out. This is a pretty short video. Let's open it up and see what it looks like. This looks very nice. Very, very solidly attached. And yeah, we have a big honking transformer that will probably give us straight imagine the 9, more like 10 or 11 volts AC, and this is probably some kind of rectifier. So I see a big electrolytic capacitor, and I see a voltage regulator, maybe it's a 7805. So yeah, I mean, I think this is not a switching power supply. Oh yeah, there's another voltage regulator right there. So I don't think this is a switching power supply. I think maybe this is just a linear one. I did test it. It worked beautifully. There was no noise of any kind on the image. So yeah, I mean, it looks very well made, very nice. The only thing that I could have wished for, and really is not a big deal, it would have been maybe nice to have a switch, on and off switch right there, but yeah, not really needed. So yeah, cool. And I guess for completeness sake, let's use it to power the Commodore and see what the voltage looks like. Okay, same thing. Okay, yeah, LED went on, and yeah, that looks very nice. And if I zoom in some and set, okay, rise in there, yep. Yeah, so we have that like we did before. I'm still unsure. Some of you mentioned that could also just be the switch bouncing. I don't know. I mean, I guess it could be right. I was saying that looks to me more like capacitors charging, but so it could be the combination of the switch bouncing and then the capacitors, yeah, charging. Oh, I have voltage. I don't have voltage. I have voltage. So that could very easily be that. But that seems to be very nice. Yep. Yep. Yeah, beautiful. So yeah, this one works great, and maybe now I have then 2 working Commodore 64 power supplies, which is fantastic. I mean, I can have one over there, one over here, or I'll save one for the VIC-20s. You can kind of almost never have enough of those. So I'm very happy with this. And yeah, I mean, hopefully this wasn't a very roundabout way an exploration of that power supply and some of the problems and some of the issues. So I thought it was really interesting. I hope you learned something and found it interesting along the way. And I promise this is the last time we talk about this one. All right. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you next video.